Welcome to the very first episode of the Kindness Subjective podcast. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Melissa Marquais, and I am the founder of the Kindness Subjective, which a lot of people like to call TKO, and I'll get into that a little bit later. I am so excited about the first guest to come on this show. His name is Cedric Williams. He is the author of It Gets Better After This. Loved your book. And first, before we jump into things, I do want to thank you because it's really hard to share your story, especially things that were traumatic and things that left you vulnerable. But I really do believe that that's the only way that we change the world and make it a better place. So I just want to let you know I'm personally grateful for you doing this, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
So I loved your book. It was amazing. I read it twice. Yeah.
You read it twice?
I read it twice. I absolutely
You
loved
read
it.
my book twice?
I read your book twice. There's a lot in there. And I want to first, my question that I want to ask you is, why did you decide to write a book about your life and your experiences?
Well, it was through the pandemic where I had a lot of time, number one. We all did during that quarantine process. Can't believe it's been 4 years. And everyone, including myself, was at a place of evaluation, self-evaluation. And God, because I'm a man of faith, God began to tell me that I had some remnants of unforgiveness in my heart. And a lot of that was rooted in being bullied, severely bullied in my adolescence and into my adult years, young adult years. So that's really where it started. So therapy for me was a sense of writing. Being a natural singer-songwriter, I began to write. And it really started out as a journal. And then as I began to share with one of my good friends who is an author, he said, man, this is a book. So I began to write, and I found out and researched the structure of how to write a book. And here we have it. That's the short end story of it. But during that process, it was therapeutic. It was a form of deliverance and breakthrough.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. I was actually thinking like this when you were talking about writing as a way of healing. The first thing I thought was a lot of people will do journals to try and heal.
Yes.
So the fact that your book started out as a journal is interesting. And
Yes.
I want to ask you about the beginning of your book, where you talk about bullies, and you talk about your first day in a new school and the spitball incident. And I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
It's just the random foolishness of kids who just want to pick on you. And it's not just those incidents, it's several that I can write a whole nother book on, just the concept and mindset of how vindictive certain children can be. But in that moment, it becomes humiliating because you're vulnerable, you're in front of friends, you're in a new place. And a lot of times you really don't know what to say. It's a shock moment. First of all, it's a spitball. It's nasty. It's it's connected with you. It's just, in that moment, I felt humiliated. And so I had naturally wanted to defend myself. And so, and a lot of times I don't think that when you're bullied, that you feel as if you have a place to defend yourself. It's enough with telling the teacher and feeling like a tattletale. But when you begin to have some confidence to defend yourself, you almost put yourself in the same category as the suspect. Because I can remember, if you read, being suspended, having the tables turned, just being a kid. And so that's what comes to mind when I think about those moments. Think about the kid that's sitting there minding his own business, and boom, something happens out of that catches them off guard for no reason and no fault of their own.
Yeah, that's a good point. And one of the things a lot of people like to refer to the kind of subjective as TKO. For one, it's the acronym it has a meaning behind it. And if you look at TKO, which is our little character. He's got a heart for a head, but he's got boxing gloves because, yes, while it's important to be kind and instill empathy and be compassionate, it's also important to be strong and have self-respect and stand up for yourself.
That's right.
And in schools in particular, one of the problems is that when you do stand up for yourself, you get in trouble.
That's right.
So it's a double-edged sword. And I remember my dad telling my brother he was getting picked on, and he punched some kid finally after he'd had enough. And the principal called and he said, well, he's not in trouble at home. I'm proud of him that he stood up for himself, right? You're going to get in trouble at school because there's rules you have to follow. And we get it. But you still have to stand up for yourself. And it's so, and I know that you, in your book, you mentioned a lot of really cruel things that the kids called you, terrible things, terrible names, and the impact of that, not only as a child, but as you went into adulthood, it still impacted you.
Yes. Yes.
Tell me about
that. Well, especially the moment where the biggest terrifying moment of my life, chapter 5.
Yeah.
Should have never happened. Should have never happened.
Do you want to share with people a little bit about chapter 5?
I mean, it started with I'll give them the short end of the stick. It started with a mentor group. And so entrusting adults that were mentoring us, we were initially hazed for being a part of an organization that kind of mirrored the concepts in which they do once you become an adult.
And you were 12 at this point.
And I was 12. I was well underage. And so the concept of grooming young people into interests of a fraternity or a sorority, these kind of things go on. But I experienced it at a minor. Most people are adults, 18, 19, 20, they're adults. But I experienced it entrusting someone that my parents had entrusted. He was a teacher, he's an educator, and just distrust that all of these guys were severely hitting on me. The adults were paddling me. It was as if I was in an actual fraternity 4 or 5 years ahead of schedule at 12.
They allowed your bullies to beat you too, right?
I'm sorry?
They allowed your bullies who happened to be there to also beat you.
Oh, all of them were, because I was the weakest link. I couldn't cooperate. I was in shock. I can't believe this is happening. I thought it was more about fun and games, but it was about experiencing that nightlife, chasing the girls. It wasn't like a mentoring program. It wasn't anything really structured. It was just come hang out with me. It gave a perception of forming something good for young men, young Black men, and it turned into some almost educated game of initiation.
I can't even imagine going through that as an adult, let alone going through that as a 12-year-old kid.
12-year-old. And the actual mentor hit me at one point because I wasn't cooperating.
When you said cooperating, what were they wanting you to do?
They wanted me to not be so soft, in a sense, not so kind.
Wow.
And sometimes that could be misconstrued as weakness, but it's not.
I'm so glad that you said that. It's not.
My father always told me that kindness and meekness doesn't mean you're weak. You have to have strength under control. Now, there are some cases where you literally have to defend yourself. And I think that's something that most victims need to learn. Maybe a basic self-defense class.
Yeah.
So they won't put themselves in harm's way where it could hurt them physically. Because there's a line of space when you greet someone. And then when it goes beyond that, they're not teachers, authorities, they're not always present. I'm not saying go get a gun. but I am saying you need to have some form of self-confidence to not let someone hurt you that can leave a permanent scar.
And something interesting that you say, and I know that when you and I met the other day, this was something we talked about a little bit. When you talk about defending yourself and having self-respect to stand up for yourself, when it comes to, high school students or middle school students, it's scary because you do need to defend yourself. But at the same time, if you defend yourself, who's to say that some kid isn't going to come into school with a weapon and have some sort of like revenge type of situation? So there's a very fine line there with defending yourself and putting yourself in possibly more danger than you would have been.
That's right.
It's very hard. When we were kids, we didn't run, you and I are the same age. We didn't have that when we were kids.
The school systems are just now understanding the severity of it. Where in the late earlys and 90s, they didn't really see it as a problem. Now there is a no tolerance for it. Once they are aware of it, those students are gone. But what happens when you're let out from school and you're walking home from school? How do we deal with that in the community? How do we deal with that in the corporate arena when someone comes to work and they're having stress pains within their stomach because their boss is barking down their throat, or they want to please the people who they work for so bad that they will forget who they are as a person to just lower their self-esteem and self-value.
Yeah, and that's another thing too with the kindness objective. When I originally started this mission, it was geared toward young kids and putting them in real life situations. Like we did a Christmas event at the veterans home, and it was fantastic. And the kids got to actually put empathy and compassion and love into action. And then when you do that, you can feel how good it feels on the inside when you think that you're the reason why somebody's happy today. So it started out with that. And then as time went on, I started to think about the fact that it's really such a societal issue. And it's not just a lack of empathy in kids. It does happen with coaches, and it happens in corporate, and it happens, and empathy needs to be, instilled in people in general. But if we can get that with little kids before they become adults, then the hope with TKO is that we can change we can have a shift in consciousness almost to encourage in a more loving, kind, gentle world.
Amen.
And you did talk about that too in your book with the dining hall experience.
Yes.
With the experience that you had in the dining hall. So as a young man, as an adult, dealing with that type of bullying or toxicity in the workplace as well. And I would love for you to share a little bit about that if you're comfortable.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what incident. I did have an incident when I worked for Dell where I was taking a phone call and the supervisor was really pushing me to push a product that the customer really didn't want. And so because I got a lot of objective on one hand from the customer versus having the goal in mind from our supervisor, and it just kept pushing and pushing and pushing to the point where I snapped. And my reaction came from a trigger that was really pushed from my childhood. At the same time, in a corporate setting, the person was very overbearing, my supervisor, and felt as if I was insubordinate. But when someone, any adult, someone is barking down your throat or yelling, everyone has a tick. Everyone has a breaking point.
So
I'm sorry?
And no one deserves that.
No one deserves that. So they let me go. When I know that I was doing the best that I could in that moment, but because of the person's authority, they felt as if that I was out of line the way I reacted. Yes, I got upset. I slammed the headphones down and said, "You take the call then. Show me what you want me to do." Mm-hmm. And they asked me to get off the floor. They pulled me in a room. Boom. I was fired.
I've talked to a lot of people that have reached out to me on LinkedIn. Layoffs are abundant right now. You know, there's no shortage of layoffs happening. And a lot of people that have reached out to me sharing stories of incidences where maybe they dealt with some toxicity at work. And when they went to a manager or they went to HR, the next thing they knew, they were on the chopping block and, you know, part of a layoff, or they were let go like you were with that situation.
Yep.
And it does happen. And if we can focus on instilling kindness and respect, I mean, it's a respect issue too, because, you know, no one should be screaming at anyone at work to begin with. Like, you have to have respect for people as human beings.
That's right.
And you also have to be a leader, and a leader is not supposed to be doing that. Like, you're a leader, you lead by guidance and by encouraging people. And those are the ways that you manifest magic in the workplace, not the opposite, like with what you experience.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it's tough.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so a lot of people have reached out and they said, so what do you do in those situations then? And I'm thinking, like, a lot of times, like, you go to HR and now you've got a target on your back. So if you're in a situation like that and you don't feel like you can have that conversation, then the best thing to do would be to look for another job and hopefully find one before, you know, you lose your sanity or you wind up in a depression, because it can happen very easily for people that are in those environments.
Or you work for yourself, like I do.
Or you work for yourself like you did. If people have the ability to do that, I would encourage that all day long.
Yep. And it's not just one incident, you know, because you try to think positive and be optimistic and try it again, and then it happens again. And you're wondering if, man, am I cursed? Is something following me? But no, at the end of the day, sometimes things happen to good people, and you're not exempt from things happening to you, but you have to know that you must give respect. It's not always earned. You have to almost set the tone that you're going to respect me.
Yeah.
You're not going to hurt me.
Absolutely.
And now you have this cyberbullying now. You know, there's 3 types of bullying. There's verbal, physical, and now cyber. And that is some cases where kids have taken their lives because of the phone.
You know, that's why I started this.
Social media.
I started it.
Yes. That's right. And so what we have to do is build the value of the person within, to have a defense mechanism to not let them be affected from things on the outside.
And that's hard when you're a kid, because
Big time.
your brain hasn't even fully developed yet.
Correct.
So
and we as adults can also, what I'm learning is, having a young daughter, is that we have to be careful that we don't give the approach of bullying through our expectations.
That is very, very, very true. And
a lot of times we can bully our ways into correcting and putting the best foot forward in what we want for our children, but we have to give them room to grow. You can't let them run over you.
They are.
You can't let them run over you. You can't really be friends when you're parenting. You have to set that's another conversation. You have to kind of set the tone in understanding that I'm the parent, I'm the legal guardian, I'm the authoritative. I'm authoritarian, a person that's going to help you and guide you, not in an abusive, controlling way, but in a loving, firm, caring way.
Absolutely. And a lot of kids don't have that type of environment at home. And so one of the things that I saw, somebody posted the other day on LinkedIn, and they said, whose responsibility is it? And it was like, is it the school, the government, the parents? And everybody was like, it's the parents. And yes, it is the parents' responsibility. But we as a society have to recognize that not every child is in a home environment that is healthy and that is teaching these kids how to grow up to be strong, good, kind adults. And so it really is everyone's responsibility.
That's right.
It's everyone's responsibility. It doesn't just fall on one person. It's right. And it's our teachers and it's our government. I know that you're local to me here in Clarksville. Did you know that our school district is suing TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram for the mental health problems that it has imposed on their students?
Wow, I did not know that.
Yes, they are actually filed a lawsuit for that.
Wow.
And you talk about that in your book.
Yep. And I think it's just more of not just the fact that they're suing them for the platform, they're suing them because they can control the malicious and menace behavior. Once they see a gathering of someone harassing, they need to shut that person's page down specifically.
Absolutely.
And they have control of that. So it's more than just the platform. People will say, oh, it's just the platform. No, you need to shut down the behavior.
Exactly. And if they can warn people on Facebook for saying something that went against their community standards, they can do it on all of them.
Correct.
They don't do it, but they need to do it.
Yes.
And parents need to get these kids off of social media at this young age anyway. My son is not, he's like, can I get a phone? I said, absolutely not. No. We don't need a phone.
Correct. At 10. I have a daughter at 10 and she wants a phone.
Same. Yeah, our kids are the same age.
Yeah. So, I mean, but then you have to be careful because there's a lot of games where they're forming, a lot of the games for social media and for the children are forming their own social community within the animations of Robux and all these other small animated platforms.
Yeah, they're very.
And they chat, they have a conversation, and you have to watch out for even those pedophiles through those things, such as digital and animation games.
Yeah, it's very easy to trick a little kid into thinking, oh, I'm in elementary school too, right? And
correct.
You're not. You're in your mother's basement and you're 50, and you know what I'm saying? Like they're not another child. And I tell my son, like, he says, can you turn on the chat function? I said, no, absolutely not. And he doesn't argue about it because he understands that.
Yeah. And you can't guard. You can't really watch every little thing because they're going to try to sneak it. At the same time, you have to give them the information as a standard, like this is the standard. If you violate that, you get taken away.
And then you got to actually follow up and take it away. You can't say it and not do it. Like that, I learned that from my dad growing up. It was like, I told you it was going to happen.
That's
and
right.
Here we are, right?
Yeah,
so
here we are.
You have to follow through on it.
That's right.
Getting back to the bullying that you encountered when you were a kid, did that carry over into your adult life?
Yes, it did. I could definitely not only say that through jobs, but even young in my marriage, and learning to jail together in the first 5 years, learning to deal with disagreements or conflict, learning to deal with it in business, having my own small business. Those are just some short examples where the reaction of anger can be developed. There's symptoms that can be developed from bullying, wanting to have control, wanting to be angry, attitude, mood swings, emotional stress. All of those things are affected by victims of bullying because you want to, it's a sense of guarding and protecting against those who have harmed you. And it doesn't allow you to grow and to trust people who actually genuinely love you and to see things authentically. Even spiritually, it can be hard because there is another one, not only cyber, but there is spiritual abuse. And I've experienced all four, where you have people in the religion aspect of things that can take advantage of you.
Yeah.
So it puts the defense mechanism on everything. And that can keep you from being liberated and growing. That can stunt the growth. You
And
know,
how
one
did it
thing,
affect self-esteem?
correct.
How did it impact your self-esteem? Like the name calling, you
Oh,
mentioned
it affected majorly because it
drinking.
affected majorly because what happens is you have these different environments where you're supposed to be confident in, especially when it comes to church, and you having these people in leadership constantly verbally abuse you, saying things that make you feel inadequate. So even as an adult, I see it all the time, even in leadership. You want to please leadership, you want to do well in your service so you can get some form of recognition and appreciation. But we have to look at the concept of how do we build our confidence within without the approval of man.
That is tremendous. And I will share something with you. When you and I, we have a lot in common. I also did music and I sang and I toured and I did all that fun stuff. There was a lot of pressure on me to be you have to look a certain way on stage, and you have to, you got a photo shoot and the camera adds 10 pounds and this and that. And it's like, all right, I got to starve myself before next Wednesday. Right. And it was a lot. And I realized when I met someone many, many years ago, it was just someone I was friends with who I loved more than anything. And I would have done anything in the world for this person. And when that person accepted me, they didn't care about the music I did. All the things that everybody else wanted to be around me because of were like irrelevant to this person. Couldn't have cared less. And they loved me for what was inside. And when I had that for the first time in my life, I didn't need all of the people in the audience to love me anymore because I learned how to love myself.
That's right.
And it didn't stem from any of the material possessions that I had. It didn't stem from a status at work. It didn't stem from any of that. It stemmed from, honestly, what was in my heart and the good that I brought to the world to help other people. And I feel like with kids, if we can, as TKO, builds and grows, when you allow kids the opportunity to have those experiences, they're going to have self-confidence in themselves because they're going to feel good about who they are. And it's incredibly important that kids feel good about who they are in here first. Right. The rest of it is irrelevant. Nothing else matters.
Nothing else matters.
All you take with you
You have to build them. You have to build them within first. You have to put them in environments that will have them grow. You have to build children up in an environment where they're structured, where it shows discipline, where it shows a level of excellence. Shout out to my good friend Marshall White. He is a dear friend of mine. He's developed a multi-million-dollar organization where he uses it around the arts. And he's not just structured in a sense of music, but in a sense of life and principles and disciplines that will help them even beyond their young adolescent years. And it's important to value and appreciate those people that help build those things within. As I got older, I always say that I had some great friends and adults that gave me those tools to help me even go through those rough times when I was a kid, to help me see the value. It wasn't always bad circumstances, but the good outweighed the bad in a lot of ways. That's why I'm still here.
Your book, I want to touch on one other thing here, while we still have a minute. Chapter 10 of your book, and I want to read something that you wrote because I think this is such a tremendous part of what is lacking with kids in schools and honestly with adults in work and just in general in society is the fact that people make these false perceptions about other people based on stereotypes or things that they think they understand but don't care to ask questions about, and they just make assumptions. And I want to read what you wrote in here. You said, it seems like two strikes is always against us before we step out into the world. A lot of stereotypes and assumptions are spoken about us. They think that that most big Black men come across as aggressive, thuggish, violent, lazy, don't have good hygiene, and are always looking for a handout. That's not true. I'm proud to say that I am a heavyset man who loves to work hard and who carries an entrepreneurial spirit. I loved that. I read that thing like 3 times.
Wow.
Because it speaks volumes to me about the misconceptions that people make about other people when they don't even know them. And I would love for you to talk about how those misperceptions have impacted your life as a man.
Well, number one, it helped me understand that man, I don't, it's tough because you could come into a room and be so confident, and then something happens and it can bring you down.
Yeah.
But I think, number one, being a man of faith and understanding that foundation is really imperative for me. Knowing that I had a good foundation within my family and friends, but ultimately making a choice to say, enough is enough. I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to have a standard in my life. In my book, it also says the 3 S's to success: having a standard, having a service, and having the will to really sit down and get some peace and embrace the silence. Those things, breaking the narrative off of what people think, stopping to say, hey, let's get over this concept of racism, of looking at my skin, sit down and get to know me. You ever be in an environment and people look at you and they're like, feel like they're looking through you, they're not really listening?
Yeah.
Those are the things that I'm trying to break. So they won't just see me, the shell. They see the spirit within.
I love that so much. How are you working to break that so that people do see the spirit within as opposed to the shell? Like, what are some methods that you've put into practice?
Well, I want to be consistent with my cadence and how I deliver my message. I want to do that through not only my books, but through my music, and also mainly through my character, and getting a lot of practice at home. Because I'm telling you, if you can't get it right at home, you're not going to do well out in the world.
If that's not
important. Because if you can get tested and respond well at home, you will win in the world.
Especially when you have a kid.
There you go.
They're testing you at every turn, especially as they get a little older. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking about your life and your book. I think you're an absolutely amazing, wonderful person. I'm so grateful to have met you and to call you now a new friend.
Yes, me too.
We're gonna do some wonderful things together. We're gonna do some speaking engagements with TKO. Yeah. And I can't thank you enough for being vulnerable and sharing your story and just being willing to come on and my first guest. So, it spoke volumes. It's not like, oh, how many viewers do you have? Like, we're just getting started. And you still said, you know what, let's do this. So thank you so much.
In a world where you have a lot of likes and shares and comments, I'd rather have 5 valuable likes and shares than 1 million. Because what I can do is make impact and be relational and help those people overcome the things that they need to help their life, and then it domino effects. I want my leadership to be have a domino effect.
Absolutely, 100%. That's the whole point. That's what we're doing, right?
Yes.
Before we jump off, if people are interested, where can they find your book?
Well, you can go to CedricWilliamsbooks.com. My first name is spelled Cedric Williams.books.com. And you can go there, read a little brief analysis of the book, scroll down to the bottom. I would graciously appreciate your support by hitting pay.
Excellent. Well, I thank you so much for doing this. For those watching that took the time to watch, thank you for taking a minute out of your day to see what we are doing here at The Kindness Objective and to learn more about Cedric and his book. Stay kind to each other, encourage kindness, inspire kindness. Until next time, have a great rest of the day.
Yes.